cold slice of pizza, a sweaty helmet, and the rush of yet another delivery. It was in that instant, amidst the chaos of traffic and the city's din, that a young delivery driver, his uniform faded with time and his eyes bearing the marks of sleepless nights, braked sharply before a brutal scene. An overturned luxury car, smoke billowing, and an unconscious woman trapped in the wreckage. Without a second thought, he tossed his bag to the ground and ran towards the fire. He didn't know her name, nor the weight of the destiny being woven there. He only felt that he needed to save her, and he did. On the other side of that shattered windshield rested the pale face of a woman who had been born into another world. A world of crystal glasses, dinners in gilded halls, and silence in wide corridors. A woman accustomed to being served, never rescued. In that suspended moment between life and death, it was a stranger with a hoarse voice and calloused hands who brought her back. By the time the firefighters arrived, he had already disappeared, like a ghost. But that moment would forever be etched in her memory, and, unknowingly, in his blood. His name was Daniel, 25 years old, living in a cramped room at the back of a forgotten neighborhood. He grew up without knowing his mother, carrying questions that time didn't answer. He worked 12 hours a day, amidst horns and heat, dreaming of saving enough money to study nursing. He was kind, even though life hadn't been. And it was this instinctive, almost foolish kindness that led him to throw himself against the flames for a stranger in a silk dress. He had no idea that this act would change everything. That this woman, lost between the glass and the blood, was more than just a client in danger. She was the origin of the emptiness he felt on birthdays, the answer to his faceless nightmares. What happens when an altruistic gesture uncovers a secret buried for decades? And how do you deal with the truth when it comes disguised as a miracle? Okay, here's that next part of the story translated into natural-sounding, professional US English. The morning after the rescue, Daniel didn't return to the scene. He continued his routine as if nothing had happened, deliveries, counting change, fleeting glances into the windows of the apartments he dreamed of living in. But something inside him was different. The smoke from that night seemed to have lodged in his lungs, as if fate had marked his chest with something he didn't yet understand. Across the city, the woman from the car, Helena Vasconcellos, 48, a businesswoman and heiress to a hotel empire, awoke in a white room, surrounded by machines and silence. The only thing she remembered clearly was the touch of the hands that had pulled her from hell. Who was that man? And why did his eyes seem so familiar? Helena, though grateful for her life, couldn't shake the feeling that the accident hadn't been just chance. Something about that night confronted her. An old feeling, buried beneath years of silence and rash decisions. She began asking discreet questions at the hospital, then the police. The delivery driver had been seen by witnesses, but had left no name or contact information. Only an abandoned helmet and a selfless act. Obsessed with finding him, she hired a private investigator. Meanwhile, Daniel heard the news reports mentioning his anonymous deed with a sense of unease. He felt restless, as if something was about to happen, something he couldn't control. When Helena finally found him weeks later, it was at a busy intersection on a stifling late afternoon. She got out of her car, wearing a simple dress, a stark contrast to her public image. She approached slowly, recognizing his features like someone rediscovering a lost echo. Daniel, confused, tried to step back, but something in her voice froze him. She didn't say his name, just, "It was you, wasn't it?" And he nodded. The conversation was brief, uncomfortable, but something opened up between them. And in that space between recognition and silence, a connection was born that neither of them could name. Why did this woman, out of so many, affect him so deeply? Helena began to seek him out frequently. She invented excuses to offer help, pay for courses for him, bring him food. Daniel was suspicious. He was used to favors with hidden debts. But she persisted with a gentleness, something almost maternal. Little by little, he gave in. They started talking in the squares between his deliveries. She asked about his childhood, about the orphanage, about the invisible scars he tried to hide. He answered carefully, but his eyes told more than his words. Helena listened in silence, but there were nights when she cried alone, holding an old photograph of a baby who had disappeared 25 years ago. Could it be possible? Doubt grew silently. Daniel felt it too. There was something about this woman that squeezed his heart, like a longing he couldn't explain. When she touched his shoulder, he felt a strange warmth. He began to have dreams of a woman singing to him, with a voice that reminded him of hers. He blurred reality with memory, past with fantasy. He asked the director of the orphanage about his first months of life. Almost no one knew anything. An anonymous abandonment, a baby found at the door. But what if he had been taken from there by a forced decision? What if his history had been erased by someone who thought they were doing the right thing? The day the truth began to emerge wasn't grand. It was in a shoebox, kept at the back of Helena's closet, that she found a blue blanket with an embroidery, "Daniel with love." It was the same one she had seen in an old photo of the orphanage, sent anonymously by a former employee. Confirmation seemed inevitable, but the fear of destroying everything prevented her from telling him. What if he hated her? What if the truth shattered the bond they were building? On the other hand, Daniel also began to piece things together. A nurse's comment, a date on his birth certificate, the way Helena's hand trembled whenever he spoke of his childhood. Both were trapped in a silent game of recognition and denial. She saw him as the boy she had lost. He saw her as the mother he never had, but neither had the courage to say it out loud, as if the truth were a spell that, once revealed, would break the enchantment. Until one day, during a storm, Helena arrived soaking wet at the restaurant where Daniel delivered pizzas. He brought her inside, dried her hands with an old cloth, and she, weak, simply whispered, "I need to tell you something." The next clap of thunder swallowed her words, but the look they exchanged said everything. What would happen now? Would they be ready to face the past and what it still hid? In the years that followed that night of revelations, Helena and Daniel rebuilt what they never imagined possible. A silent bond that now had a name, a history, and forgiveness. Confirmation came after tests, recovered documents, and long conversations, some painful, others liberating. Helena, once enveloped in the pressures of the corporate world, stepped down as president of her company and created a foundation dedicated to at-risk youth, named after the son she believed she had lost forever. As for Daniel, once disillusioned with life, he became the heart of the project, leading workshops, caring for newcomers, and using his own journey as a beacon for those who arrived lost, as he once had been. The relationship between the two wasn't simple. Between mother and son lay years of silence, irreversible decisions, and a longing shaped by incomplete versions of love. But with time, they learned to walk side by side, not rushing to piece together what was broken, but with the courage to build anew. On Sunday afternoons, they would share coffee on the same park bench where Helena had given him his first books. They talked about the present, about the young people they helped, about the small miracles of everyday life. And sometimes, without saying a word, they would just look at each other, like those who recognize in the other not only blood, but a mutual rescue. Daniel never forgot the night he felt he held someone's life in his hands, and that, unknowingly, he was also being saved. Helena never stopped wondering how the universe weaves such improbable paths. And even without understanding all the answers, they learned that some stories aren't explained by logic, but by faith. The wound of abandonment was reframed, not through forgetting, but through rebuilding. They chose love, the kind that forgives time, absence, fear, and that transforms what seemed lost into purpose. The impact of that reunion spread like ripples. The foundation expanded, sheltering dozens of young people, each with their own history marked by pain, but now rewritten with hope. Helena, once a symbol of elegance and rigidity, became a constant presence in the hallways of the community center. Daniel, in turn, became a role model for many, not because of his origin or suffering, but because of his choice not to become bitter. Their story ceased to be just theirs. It began to belong to everyone who believes that, even in the darkest days, there are hands that pull us back into the light. Today, 10 years later, Daniel is a father. He named his daughter Aurora, in homage to the new dawn Helena brought into his life. Helena, now a grandmother, rediscovers in the little girl traces of a time she thought was buried. They walk together, with the visible and invisible marks that time doesn't erase, but with the renewed glow of those who didn't give up on each other. Their stories, intertwined by chance, became a legacy, and every young person welcomed by them hears the same phrase. Sometimes, life finds a way to give back what you thought you never had. The final scene takes place in the old square, in a golden twilight. Helena is sitting, Aurora runs along the stone paths, and Daniel, with a notebook in his lap, writes. He stops, looks at his daughter, then at his mother and smiles. The sun bathes them in warm light, as if time, finally, is at peace with them. There was no magical twist, no immediate forgiveness, but there was love built with patience and devotion. And in that shared silence, the listener understands. The greatest transformation wasn't the reunion itself, but everything it awakened. Because sometimes all we need is for someone to see in us what we didn't even know existed, and to stay even then.